Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining Toxic to Triumph. I'm your host, Matthew Pfeiffer. I'm here with Levi Washington, one of my favorite creators on TikTok. It's not very often that you have a guy talking about toxic relationships like myself and like like a handful of other creators. I think we're the last of a dying breed, I think, but he's up in Calgary, Canada. And, I didn't ask you, like, what's the best way? Do you have a website? What's the best way for people to reach out to you?
Well, first of all, just Matt, I'm honored to be on here with you. But if you want to get in contact with me, you can see me on Instagram and TikTok. Those are probably the two only main sources of social media that I'm available on right now.
Okay. And is it just Levi? Is your handle just Levi Washington? Is that the best way to?
Yes, sir. At
Great.
Levi Washington.
Great. And so Levi, he is a poet. He's also a personal trainer. He is also a life coach. In particular, do you primarily stick to dating and relationships, or do you do pretty much everything?
Well, yeah, pretty much everything. It's more of a open conversation wherever you feel like you are feeling misunderstood or not heard, and just creating a safe space for that, because sometimes it's really important. We don't have that in our lives. So I got into life coaching to kind of provide a safe space for people to explore conversation and maybe be asked questions that they've never been asked before, and connect some of the dots that are often already there in ourselves without the stigma that comes along with going to see a therapist, because that was something that really held me back from going to therapy. And just having that space where we can have an honest conversation from somebody who doesn't have an impact on our reputation with our friends and our family and things like that.
And oftentimes that stigma comes from a place of judgment. And I think that is very true when we're talking about from men. We definitely don't like feeling like we're being judged for our decisions. I mean, one thing, obviously you're open about the fact that you've gone to therapy. I go to therapy all the time, even currently still go to a therapist, but there is that fear of judgment, right? And one of the things that we can really tie that into is TikTok and that fear of judgment. Do you feel like that's really helped you overcome being judged and people being critical of you? Or what would you say, like, how would you overcome that fear of judgment and that thought process that someone is looking at you funny or judging you for something that you've said or done?
That's a big question. Very, very relatable question too. I think it was very difficult at first because, I always had this persona, keeping people at an arm's distance and only wanting them to see parts of myself that I had catered to look a certain way, to fit a certain standard and picture of masculinity or whatever other standard that I'd been following or ideal. But as I began to open myself up a little bit more and be a little bit more real and find acceptance for those things, that there was such freedom in that. And so, yeah, presenting myself through social media was a huge, huge part of my freedom. And yeah, there were some people that I lost some friendships and I was judged for different things, sure. But at the end of the day, I was allowed to be me. And as I allowed myself to be more myself, that outweighed living in some sort of shell that everybody accepted. I'd rather be, I think the quote is, I'd rather be hated for what I am than loved for what I'm not.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's powerful. Hated. Sorry.
It's all good. It's all good. You got to.
Okay. So tell me more about losing friendships through this process, right? This stigma of like loving who you are. It seems, and that's something I can definitely relate to, that the more you love who you are, all of a sudden people who may have been taking advantage of it, or the place that you were at, all of a sudden these people that were in your circle, and you find out that they weren't necessarily in your corner. Tell me a little bit more about that process, what that process was like, and maybe what do you tell people who are going through that process themselves?
I think I like to put pictures to things because I need kind of like a pop-up book in my mind to
Yeah.
understand like things that are a little bit more
You're a
esoteric at
metaphor guy
times.
like I am.
Oh,
So
oh,
yeah.
for sure,
Uh-huh.
man. So, what I kind of present to myself is that it's like you're in this pool, and everybody's in the shallow end of the pool, and it's safe there. But as you step out into the deeper water and you want to learn how to swim, and you start being a little bit more real, and you start building some of these different muscles, and there's freedom that you start to find. And but when you start going out there, you want that for your friends. You look back in the shallow water, you might go back there, but it just doesn't, you start to see the emptiness. You start to see that kind of like that surface sort of, why, how come everything that I'm achieving never feels like anything, right? And so you go back to the deep water. But what happens there is it starts to get lonely, but then maybe you start trying to pull some of your friends out into the deep water. But what happens when you pull somebody out into deeper water that they're not ready for or they don't want to be in? Well, now you have a situation where they start to resent you for pulling them there. Everybody's drowning, and it's just a mess.
Right.
So, and that's what happened in a lot of those relationships is you're just not on the same at the same place anymore.
Right.
And that's okay,
Mm-hmm.
right? And being able to say that that's okay is the hardest part, because there's loyalty, there's experience, there's investment that you have in all of these friendships, and you want so bad to like bring them along with you, but that's sometimes it's not how it works.
It's a tough decision to make sometimes, right? Because some people choose to stay in the shallow end because it, like you said, it's more comfortable. But sometimes the deep end is where you actually need to be, and it's actually more fulfilling because you're ready for it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I guess that's something that I've been toying with in my mind is what who decides what's wrong or right, or what's better or what's worse. So sometimes I think that that's the process that I went mentally over the last couple of years. And if somebody wants to continue living in that sort of way, who am I to judge them for it?
Mm-hmm.
Because there's such a big part of me that like has just been exuding that sort of judgment, is like, you're so shallow, you're so this, you're so that. But like, who am I to say that?
Right.
And why am I
Right.
spending my energy doing that when it's like I can focus on my own ability to swim? And if they want to come out, they can come out. If they want to
Mm-hmm.
stay there, they can stay there. And allowing people to choose the way that they want to live without as much judgment, because that's something that I think people really come across as they start to step into bigger things.
How do you see this play out in the dating scene? I know you talk about dating all the time, and when people are coming out of a bad situation, bad relationship, um, their friends have changed. Like when you talk about dating all the time, people don't necessarily going back to something you just said about the shallow end, right, and the deep end. You're trying to pull people into the deep end, right? Because a lot of people are in that shallow dating pool. They have this certain expectation of the way that dating should be, not realizing that they're just recycling the same swimming experience. Sticking with your analogy, right? Um, what, how do you see this playing out in our dating culture, so to speak?
Yeah. Um, how would I like to answer that? How do I see that playing out in our dating culture? I think, like you said, man, it really comes down to, it's very hard to step out into uncomfortable water and realizing that there's just a lot less people as you swim out deeper.
Right.
And I think that that's a really difficult thing. It's because it gets really lonely, and
Right.
it's so easy to just go back to where it's shallow and there's lots of people and it's fun, and you can numb and stimulate your way into oblivion there, right? And
Right.
so it's the path of least resistance is the most often traveled, and that's the same thing in our dating relationships as well. It's difficult to be a good communicator. It's difficult to partner through conflict. It's easy to blame. It's easy to avoid. It's easy to ghost.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why those things happen so often.
And people who are stuck in that cycle of ghosting and blaming, right? We hear all the time, hear from women, it's all the guys, right? There's no good men there. You hear from guys, women are gold diggers. Women only want guys who, and they have 6 foot and beards and this, and how it can almost be intimidating, right? For on both ends, right? For a man or a woman to hear these things consistently on social media, right? Is is the dating scene toxic, or is this like what is it just more on the forefront at this point?
Yeah, good question. I believe that social media has brought more of like a magnifying glass, a looking glass, even to the issues that, and even like a lot of biological factors that are there naturally, right? Like biologically speaking, pregnancy means extreme vulnerability. And so, biologically speaking, if you're a woman and you're going to be vulnerable for 12 months, you want to be in a situation where you're going to be safe, supported, and have a place where those kids are going to be raised with the highest possible um, success opportunities, which is going to be somebody who has the money to support that
Mm-hmm.
naturally. Men are seeking the highest possible genetic specimen to create the strongest children with.
Right.
Yeah, and so there's natural factors involved and all different types of things like that, and it's very very difficult to navigate sometimes, especially when it comes to we have to accept certain limitations, which is a really important part I think of dating. It's like if you're not 6'1", that's okay. It doesn't mean everybody has to accept you if you're 5'7". And just because a girl isn't into that, that's her prerogative. And being 5'7", there's somebody out there for you, but you can't expect everybody to cater to your circumstance.
Yeah, and that's so true. Like because and you see and you hear this a lot, even if someone doesn't necessarily openly say this, everyone has this deep root fear of rejection and of abandonment, where because you don't fit that mold that people are putting out, that stereotype that people are putting out online, maybe you can't grow a beard, and so you think that no one is going to like you because you have so many people on the forefront saying that they want a guy with beards, or a woman who may not feel like she fits into that body type that guys put out and guys are posting about and talking about, and feel like they just have no shot, so they just give up, right? But there is someone for, even though um, that might be the perception on social media, that's just not reality, right? How would one overcome that fear of rejection, that thought process?
Mm.
Or
Man,
do you just embrace it?
really, it is kind of more or less learning how to embrace it and understanding how to play the cards that you've been dealt. All right, so you don't have a handful of aces, as what society would consider aces
Mm-hmm.
to be, but how do you play what you have to the best of your ability?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's all you can really do. And I think that that's what empowerment is really all about. It's not about trying to compare yourself to the financial status of a CEO and the hairline of a hair model.
Right.
Like I can't compete.
Right.
And if
No, me
I'm
neither. Both of us wearing hats right now.
yes, sir.
Uh-huh.
So, if I'm comparing myself to all of these different aspects of success, that's what makes social media so difficult, is because I'm comparing every minute detail of my life to the 1% in the world due to the looking glass that social media provides. But it's really about really taking inventory of what Levi Washington has,
Mm-hmm.
and how do I play that to the best of my ability? How do I work on my strengths
Mm-hmm.
and invest in my strengths and what I bring to the table, rather than saying like, man, look what everybody else has.
Right. Going in, you hit a key word. I'm writing down as we speak: investing, right? Investing time into yourself. And there's times where people, I think both of us have run into this online, where people are asking us like, what do I do when I'm the toxic one, when I recognize that I'm the problem? Even though they may have gone through a breakup, and we can both say that in most breakups, and all breakups really, that both people have some toxic traits, right? And you begin to recognize that that's you. When we get back into this word of investing and you start to see those things, what do we do? Like, how do you reconcile and how do you solve these toxic traits when they've been ingrained into you from possibly since childhood?
Yeah, that's a difficult one. That's been a life's journey for myself. Um, and I think what it really came down to for me, as far as the best tools that I could summarize would be, I wrote my own eulogy. I wrote my own eulogy, and about what, not as much about my achievements, but for what I wanted people to say about my character
Mm-hmm.
when I'm gone. And then I asked myself, well, if I don't take a breath tomorrow, would they say that?
Right.
And that hit me square between the eyes, because it's like, no, then I'm not the man that I want to be. And if I don't really have a direction, if I don't really have an aim for who I want to be, then obviously I'm just going to continue to flounder in my current behaviors, and who I am today is who I'm becoming tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
I don't get the promotion to manager if I'm still acting like a part-time employee. So maybe it's time that I start making some changes and start developing some different behavior patterns. And it takes a lot of very, very intentional work. It takes going back into those childhood wounds that a lot of times we're just living out of these coping mechanisms that we learned when we were young, and we've just, that kind of ties back to this thought about people want to talk a lot about emotional intelligence and emotional maturity. Well, a lot of that is just healing your inner child, because you just stopped maturing at a certain age. You hit this trauma, and since then you've just been a cope ever since.
Yeah.
And you got to go back into that and deal with what happened then, and then that's actually how your inner child starts to mature, and that's how your emotional maturity begins.
Mm-hmm.
In that area.
It's funny that you say that you wrote your own eulogy. I tell the people I work with, and I've done this for myself, is really truly looking at your legacy, right? And knowing, like, what legacy am I actually leaving with this behavior that I have, and what legacy do I want people, when people talk about me and they say, Matthew or Levi, they really enjoyed blah, right? And this is one of the things I tell and teach people on how to find their true happiness, right? When you leave this earth, when people are talking about what made you happy, what is it? Was it traveling? Was it this? What legacy do you want to leave for other people? The impact that you want to leave on this earth, right? So that's powerful that you wrote your own eulogy. Was that scary for you to do it?
Yeah, I had nothing to lose at that point, so that's how I felt inside. So I don't think I was really scary. I don't think I was really scared per se, but it was difficult. I think the reality of the words that were coming out and how it was not me at all. Like the person I saw in the mirror was not who I was writing about.
Mm-hmm.
It was not as much scary as it was just a slap, just a slap to the face, man.
Yeah. When people come back to this whole dating situation, I know you see all the time and you talk about it often, when people are recycling the same experience with a different face.
Yeah.
Right. What do you see as the problem there?
Well, in most cases, I dare to say that's if this person, that person, that person, that person, the common denominator must be us, right? By mathematics alone. Therefore, we're trying to fill up a void that, this person doesn't fill, that person does. That's not the size it is. That those people aren't filling this hole, so nobody's going to fill it. It's actually our own, and often it's a reflection of typically the first definition of love that was handed to us, the blueprint that our parents gave us. So it's like, yeah, no wonder that these three X's did not fit this hole, because this hole was the size of my dad. Right. This hole was the size of my mom. And I keep trying to like put myself into this situation, and I'm reflecting the situation over and over and over, trying to heal this wound. And I think these people are the reason. I think these relationships are the reason, but they're the tip of the iceberg. And most of the ice is actually under the water. And that's what actually sinks the Titanic and ends each of these love stories.
Yeah. So, and what would you say, how would one avoid, I mean, we see people cycling through these relationships quickly, and, you hear people like days and weeks after meeting someone like highly involved, like this person is like the, you know, the next coming of Christ, so to speak, right? So like what, like, but at the same time, when, you know, when I talk to people, and I know you say, you say some of the same message online about slowing down, right? Really getting to know the person. I tell people all the time, like, don't read this person like a resume, read them like a book, take your time. But what does that even mean? Like, how would you put that in words? Like, slow it down. Like, what does pace even look like?
Yeah. I think it can look different for different people. And I think sometimes we got to recognize some of that. So it wouldn't be the same for somebody who's had a pattern of, like, for example, if somebody's just been using you for sex
Mm-hmm.
over and over and over and over, well, that person might actually just need to take sex off the table completely, right? So there's certain things that are going to be up to your individual situation, but overall, slowing it down really means like, hey, you need to get to know their character, like, what are their values and what are your values?
Mm-hmm.
Often we're picking the person and then trying to manipulate our values and their boundaries around each other. It's like, I love you. I mean, we don't believe the same things. I want to raise my kids as atheists and you want to raise yours going to church every weekend, but we love each other. So no, come on, your values don't align. That's not going to work.
Right.
And so
Not compatible.
You're not compatible, and that's okay.
Yeah.
You could really like each other and still not be
Mm-hmm.
like life journey compatible, right?
And then that's where that fear of rejection comes in, that we're not compatible. We're trying to force something that will never work or won't work like in a happy, peaceful way, right? Because we're afraid of the rejection and what people are going to say about another breakup or things not working out, you know, and you're 3 months in, you've already moved in, and now you're really up shit's creek, right?
Yeah. Yeah, man. How often that happens is
Mm-hmm.
it's tragic, really.
Yeah, absolutely. What about some healthy tips that you might have for people? Like, what are some good habits that people should have when it comes to dating and relationships, that they know that they're doing it right, that maybe I did find someone that is a good connection, I just don't want to screw it up?
Well, once again, it's like, it's so nuanced. Sometimes I have a hard time. I have a hard time generalizing healthy behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
Let me be real with you right
Yeah.
now. I'm so experienced with red flags and toxicity
Mm-hmm.
that what I struggle with is actually recognizing the green flags.
Mm-hmm.
I spend so much time. I mean, like, I guess that's even the way that I've learned to try and redefine love in my life, right?
Yeah.
I don't know what love is, but I'm just trying to get rid of what it isn't so I can
Yeah.
get closer to what it is. So I actually can't give like an awesome answer for that, other than really look for somebody who conflict resolution,
Mm-hmm.
who can communicate and partner through conflict, I think is one of the most important things that you can look for, and somebody who allows you to feel like you can be yourself, not somebody who makes you feel anxious, like you need to put on a front in order to impress them, in order to be something, in order to you need to change yourself in order to be good enough for them or to fit into their picture, but somebody who just allows you to feel like you can open up more parts of yourself.
Right. You say you didn't want to give you couldn't give an honest answer. You did a pretty good damn job. Like, you know, and because that conflict resolution is huge. Everyone, you know, I did a video on this the other day where everyone looks at the highlights of these relationships, right? In the dating scene, and, you know, good dates, great sex, good vacations. Mm-hmm. Literally anybody can do that. Even toxic relationships have those good times, right? But when we start looking at when things aren't going so good, how is this person, you know, are they fighting fair or are they fighting dirty? Right? Do they want to win this argument at all costs, even at the cost of the relationship and hitting below the belt? Or are they fighting fair? Like, we're fighting within the confines of this relationship. We don't talk about each other's family. We don't call each other names. We don't raise hands towards each other. And, you know, they just know that there's certain areas they just don't go. That's the difference, you know, between, in my opinion, the difference between a healthy and a toxic relationship is what's the behavior like when you're fighting, when things aren't going so good?
I
I think
agree, man. That's huge. That's huge.
we've both been there. Like, we talked offline about how at one point in time we can admit that, we may have been the person who may have been the one causing that sort of drama. And do you talk about attachment at all?
Yeah, well, attachment types and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm not super familiar with all the behaviors related to each of the labels,
Right.
but often when people ask me about it, our attachment styles are just a way to kind of categorize and make sense of the attachment blueprints that we were given. Like, once again, it comes back a lot of times to our parents.
Yeah.
The avoidant, the anxious, and that's what we kind of learned from our parents. And the attachment styles are a really good way to help us, understand more about how they play out.
Mm-hmm.
For sure.
What would you say some common misconceptions in dating might be, just in your opinion?
I think misconceptions around dating. I'm not really sure, man.
Maybe even some myths, in terms of things that people think work in dating, and it really sends them down the wrong path. One for me is feeling like putting too much emphasis in chemistry, thinking that chemistry is everything when it really should be about compatibility, feeling butterflies. And if another one is for me is the first date has to be perfect and has to be spectacular and immaculate. And when going back to something you said, that says nothing about someone's character, whether or not the first date was good.
I mean, I think there's a lot of misconceptions floating around in the ether around what dating should be or shouldn't be. But once again, often that kind of comes down to our individual relationships. What I really focus on is the better relationship I can have with myself, the better relationship I can have with others. We often, like, the misconception of somebody else is going to complete us.
Yeah.
That, once I meet that person, it's just going to click.
Yeah.
Oh no, like, that's not really like, or the one.
I was just about to ask you about the one. Is that a real thing? Do you believe in the one?
No, because I think that would kind of eliminate basically free will. If there's just one person out in the billions of people in the world, and they had to make all of their life decisions that lined up specifically to line up with all of your life decisions, well, then we're just living some sort of script.
Yeah.
More or less. And I don't think that's true. I don't think all these things can be predestined. I mean, honestly, my beliefs would say that that everything is written, like all the different ways my life could end up, all the million different patterns that I could choose, but I actually choose the narrative every single day of where that ultimately goes. It's kind of like that Netflix that was called Bandersnatch, where you kind of like choose your story. And that's kind of how I really see life and dating. It's like, okay, yeah, if I would have made some different decisions, maybe I would be married with kids by now, like my brother. But I'm not. I made these decisions. And that doesn't mean that the rest of my life is moot. No, right. Now I need to just make decisions from here to make the best possible outcome. Still, there's always a best possible plan for your life.
You mentioned something earlier I wanted to circle back to, with this having a good relationship with yourself. And I know a lot of people I talk to, they don't even know how to do that, right? Becomes so, it's one of those things that it's real to love yourself and have a good relationship with yourself. And those are facts, and those, that no one really can deny, but no one really knows like how to do it. Like what would you say, like, for someone who's like, okay, yeah, love yourself. Like, what does that actually mean? What does that actually look like to have a good relationship with yourself?
Okay. I'll break that down. That's a question I get asked a lot. So self-love and self-trust are kind of like the two cornerstones that I really focus on. And to break down self-love, it's like, love is not just a feeling. It's an action, right? I can't, if I'm in a relationship with you and I just feel like I love you, first of all, if I'm not telling you, second of all, if I'm not aligning my actions up to show you, I don't.
Right.
I don't, period, full stop. So you might be telling yourself in your brain, like, yeah, I love myself. No, you don't. No, you don't. If you love your car, doesn't matter the make, model, whatever type of car you drive in, you're taking care of it. Right. So you want to love if you love your mind and you're not edifying it, you're not reading, you're not writing. Okay. No, you don't.
Right.
You love your heart. You're allowing toxic people to remain in your life, and you're not going to therapy and trying to work on some of these heart issues that are going on, deal with the inner child. No, you don't love your heart.
Right.
You say you love your body, you're feeding it full of garbage and not taking care of it. No, you don't. Sorry. Period. You don't love yourself. Right. And so if you want to start loving yourself, you need to start putting these things into actions.
Go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, go ahead, man.
How does when someone is loving themselves, how does that translate into better relationships with other people?
Well, I think that I can't expect to be treated in a way that I can't treat myself. I can't expect somebody else to love my body if I don't. I can't expect somebody else to take care of parts of me that I'm not willing to take care of. And that's kind of how it translates out, I believe.
Yeah, I think some other people have said, I've heard someone else say at one point in time, no one else is going to take you serious if you're not taking yourself serious. And it sounds like they really just kind of go hand in hand.
Yeah, I like that.
What are some, we're starting to run out of time a bit. What would be some of your closing thoughts on dating, on relationships, or just in life in general that you might see, maybe like one closing thought in terms of, it could be related to anything, even just in life in general, that maybe you see with people, or that people that you work with?
I want people to know that their story matters.
Mm-hmm.
Don't devalue what you've been through. Don't devalue your story. Don't devalue your voice. It's important. And your life is touching other people's lives, whether you like it or not, whether it's through example, whether it's through words. And that's about taking inventory of the cards you have and playing them to the best of your ability. Okay, so maybe you might not have the money to give to this charity in the way that okay, so maybe you just got time on your hands. How are you investing that?
Right.
How are you investing that? How are you investing the cards you've been dealt? And don't be afraid of your story, and don't devalue the words that you have to speak in the world. They're valuable.
Right. It's powerful. Levi, thank you very much for hopping on, for being a guest today. Levi Washington, you can find him on TikTok at Levi Washington, on Instagram at Levi Washington. And remind me, did you say you had a website as well?
I don't, but no, the Shopify is coming through pretty soon. So
okay.
that'll be the website. Yeah, I'll have some merch coming out soon. So
all right. So you guys keep an eye out for that as well. So thank you once again very much for hopping on, and we'll do this again soon.
Hey, appreciate it, Matt.
No problem.